And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101, our Thursday edition this week. And as usual, it's never a dull week for politics in Guyana. Of course, yesterday we had the tragic murder in the wee hours of the morning of Mr. Orin um, Bostwick. Um, I, I think I'm getting the name right there.
Boston.
Miss Oren Boston in Dartmouth, a young 29, 30-year-old man was murdered at the hands of the SWAT team that apparently was sent on the Essequibo coast to look for contraband items. And instead of unearthing contraband items, we got the body of yet another young black man. Um, his life being snuffed out at the hands of the state. John King's ballad, Calypso. I woke up early this morning, and indeed it was early morning when Mark Benschop called to wake me up. I am 3 hours behind Guyana time, behind New York time. So I wake up a little bit later, and Mark asked me if I heard the news, and I asked him what news. I just turned and I picked up the phone and tried to find out what had happened overnight while I was sleeping. And he said a man was murdered in Essequibo, and as I should catch up with the news as quickly as possible. And I did, and there it was, police kicking down the door and murdering another black man. I'm a student of the civil rights movement in the United States of America, and I remember hearing the late John Lewis saying we were burying our dead almost every day. How many more funerals? How many more deaths? And those words kept ringing in my ears yesterday morning, and I'm still stunned. I was on the air with Mark for an hour. I had to leave because I taught yesterday, and it was quite a rough day teaching students. One of my courses that I taught, a graduate course that I taught yesterday, was the Black diaspora. And I couldn't help but beginning my class by speaking about how death, murder of Black people have dominated that experience over the last 400 years or so. I remember the late Rex Nettleford in an interview with me saying, we must remember that most of the experience of the Caribbean has been in bondage. And that stuck in my mind. And I would like to add to Professor Rex Nettleford's description. Most of that experience has been an experience of violence meted out to people. How on earth you go looking for contraband, and instead of bringing out contraband, you brought out the body of a dead man and took it to the hospital? It seems as though generation after generation, year after year, we are confronted with these demons. They don't go away. They pause. There's a pause. There was a pause of 5 years when we didn't experience that kind of obscenity against the Black body. Not that they weren't shootings and killings, they were. But the kind of reckless disregard for the value of life, the value of Black life. One felt that at least it was dimmed, if not that it had gone away. And just like a thief in the night, it has come back. I recall the police knocking down the door and going into Chris Jones's house, his home, in the presence of his wife and children, terrorized him. They didn't kill him, but they terrorized him. And I remember hearing his wife talking about the trauma of her children watching these men barging into the home unwelcomed and terrorizing their father. And it occurred to me then that it didn't take long for the hand of murder to return to our Guyana. And yesterday morning, they did the same thing. They barged into that man's home, and in front of his wife and his children, they murdered him. How many more? How many more? When some of us last year pleaded with external forces, pleaded with our elites, please do not put back the people in government on its own, especially in the circumstances as they did. It is because we live with that fear. I live with that fear every day, partly because I've studied these societies, and partly because I've been active in Guyana for over 40 years, and I have a sense of the relationship between those who we give power to. There's a relationship between the way they behave and the lack of regard we have for lives, especially Black lives. It was a fear. And everything that has happened since last year, August, everything has increased that fear. I weep. I weep in private many days because I know what we're up against. The economic violence, physical violence, the cultural violence. And I recognize that there is nothing on earth to stop those who have power in their hands from using it in the most vicious way against those people who look like me. Except there's no power except the power of the people to remove them far away from power. I respect the democratic process, but democracy must recognize when it can be used as the mask, when it can be used as a stepping stone to genocide and murder. And in that case, democracy becomes anti-democracy. There's absolutely nothing democratic about kicking down a man's door, going into his home, killing him, and saying there was a confrontation. In the first place, what are you doing? Kicking his door open. You want him for contraband? You want to know if he gets that? Go in the day. Go in the open daylight and look for what you want to look. What are you doing at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, kicking a man's door down and going into his house and said there was a confrontation, so you shoot him? If you come into my house at 4 o'clock in the morning unannounced, what do you expect? I don't know whether there was a confrontation. I don't know. But if they're saying there was a confrontation, what the hell do you expect? It is the way in which they insult our intelligence. They kill us and then insult our intelligence. Tonight, we want to talk about another insult, another obscenity, another disregard for the rule of law. And I want to take us back a few weeks ago when the Police Service Commission appointed 130 odd, or promoted 130 odd policemen and women as they were constitutionally bound to do. And the Commission of Police refused to promote those men and women who had earned their promotion. And their promotion is linked to their livelihood, to the amount of money they get and all that stuff. The Commission of Police did not. And the president who is the commander-in-chief, also did not move to promote those men and women. Why? Because as we had been schooled for weeks, the president and others have tried to pressure the commission to promote policemen and women who were favorable to them. And because the commission did not do that, they are now punishing those who have earned their promotion. They had already proceeded to punish the members of the commission by instituting charges against them. The commission went to court and it asked the court to find, of course, that the president and the Commission of Police are in breach of the Constitution in their refusal to promote the men as recommended by the Police Service Commission. And then there was a procedural matter of whether, in fact, the president could be part of the case. And the argument was that this president is immune, and so therefore the Public Service Commission could not take him to court. And the matter was heard today, and it's a very important matter because it speaks to whether we have an absolute president. See, the monarchy has absolute powers, the king, the queen of old. And the question before the court today was whether our president has absolute power. Like the monarchy of old. And the court made a ruling today. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the case, the implications of the ruling today for the case, but the implications of the ruling today for Guyana. My guest is the lawyer, the attorney who represents the Police Service Commission, Attorney Selwyn Peters, one of the hardworking attorneys and someone who I can refer to as a brother. Brother Selwyn, welcome to today's program. I had to begin, I could not begin the program when we scheduled for you to be on today. I didn't realize that there was going to be a murder in the darkness of the night a day before, and so I had to begin there. But I will not entangle you with that for now, at least. Maybe at the end of the program, we'll talk a little bit about extradition killings. But we want to concentrate today on the case. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. First, give us a background of the case, because, you know, it's been 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5 weeks, and so much has happened that our people are bombarded every day with these things that sometimes these things fall through the cracks, we forget them. So refresh our memories as to what this whole case was about and how we got to today's hearing, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, good evening, Dr. Hines, and good evening to the viewers in Guyana and the diaspora. Dr. Hines, with the greatest amount of respect, can we stick for a minute on the discussion that you just had, because that's very important, and I know you have the time to deal with the Police Service Commission's matter, but the loss of a life due to police extrajudicial killing is significantly important, and I don't know if I can ask for your indulgence for a second for us to talk about that, and then we go on to the Police Service Commission case.
As you all would say in court, I'm guided.
Yes, and Dr. Hines, interestingly enough, the last time I was on your program, we were discussing the Peter Headley matter. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
I was on your program to discuss the extrajudicial killing of a man named Peter Headley, and we spent some time discussing the etiology of these extrajudicial killings, particularly in Guyana, and how the system has failed not only the victims, but their family, their loved ones, their friends, and the wider populace. And so here we are. You scheduled this program as you said, you know, you didn't script last night that there was going to be another extrajudicial killing before you come on Politics 101 today. And, you know, you asked the question, why was the police at this person's house at 3 o'clock in the morning? Normally, they're warrants so that there's a judicial process so that these police actions are vetted. And so the question is whether they operated under a warrant or whether they operated without a warrant. If they operated without a warrant, what standard operation procedures were followed or not followed? And so, you know, this case here is a lot of significant and important issues that are quite troubling. You enter a person's house at 3 o'clock in the morning and executed the person. Who was the intellectual author behind this police execution and this police sort of no-knock warrant or no-knock entrance into this property that resulted in the demise of this business person who appeared from all the readings in on social media to be widely respected? You know, so there are a lot of significant and important issues, and not only for the criminal law but for the public interest. And you know, it's concerning. Like, how did this specialized weapons team, weaponized and static team get to Essequibo? Who ordered them to Essequibo? What was their instructions? Who issued the instructions? I mean, it's troubling, Dr. Hines, and I think it's all involving policing. It's all involving political interference or other interference in the Guyana police force. And so it follows along the line of the Police Service Commission case, which we are going to discuss. And so I thought, you know what, let's ventilate on this for a second.
And you're quite correct. And you raise very important questions there. This is a team that left Georgetown, according to the police statement, that they were going there to see about people who were hoarding contraband. And they had to make 3 stops. It appears as though this stop at the victim's house was the last stop. The crime chief, I'm hearing, is saying that he did not know about what instructions were given. He did not know about the SWAT team going. Help us shed some light how these things operate. If you were sending a SWAT team, who would issue the instructions, and what instructions are usually given?
Right, and there would be a special operations procedure for the special weapons and tactic team, because normally they would be deployed in situations where there's a hostage taking situation, or where there's a situation where there is a significant risk to life that not only the local police team cannot handle, but the tactical services unit cannot handle. Because you have the local police, but you also have the tactical services unit, and then you have the special weapons and tactic team. They are normally deployed by the Assistant Commissioner Operations, who is Clifton Hicken. He's in that capacity right now. So you have to ask the questions. What was the special orders issued in this case?
And from your knowledge of these things, is the search for prohibited goods, does that demand that level of intervention?
Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't demand that level of intervention. Let me say this firstly. Like, if you're looking for prohibited goods or contraband, let's say it's contraband you're looking for, illegal liquor or whatever it is you're looking for, that doesn't require a search at 3 a.m. in the morning. But if it requires a search at 3 a.m. in the morning, you would think that you would get judicial authorization for that search, and you'd have to really state a case as to why a no-knock warrant at 3 o'clock in the morning is necessary, rather than something during daylight from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I mean, Guyana is supposed to operate on the rule of law, and the police is not above the law in the same way as the president of this country is not above the law. And so if they're operating at as you know, Dr. Hines, I was the lawyer for the Joint Services. So I acted more than once in the capacity of the lawyer, as a lawyer for the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Prison Service, the Guyana Defense Force. And I was the legal mind behind the operation. They called Operation Restore Order in 2016, that conducted a raid on the Guyana Prison Service with the Joint Services, and took back the prison from the hands of the prisoners who had effectively taken operation of that prison. And we had standard operation procedures that were enforced, and I issued a legal opinion including what would have constituted a kill order. So no one was killed during that operation, but if anyone was to be killed, I wrote the direction as to how the posture of the police, the army, and the prison service would have operated in those circumstances, that would have resulted in the loss of life. And I was there on the operation to ensure that, as practicable as possible, no lives were lost. So you ask how these things unfold. Normally they would even seek advice from their legal counsel, because that has happened in the past, and I was part of that process. So it's going to be interesting to understand what took place in these circumstances, who issued the orders, what advice they got from whom, how high this thing went. That they went to Essequibo, and they certainly entered into an operation that is questionable, because the version that they provided to the public makes absolutely no sense. They're saying that this person tried to grab an officer's weapon, and in the process, um, he was shot. So, in police parlance, they're trying to fix a scenario, right? They're trying to fix the scene to result in an outcome that's favorable to them.
You're obviously familiar, Selvin, with that case in Kentucky, where the police went in with a no-knock order and killed that young lady, the nurse. Her name escapes me now. And that case gained notoriety. Yes, they check the name there for me because I should remember these names, but there are so many, so many. Um, and in the process looking for her boyfriend, they end up shooting her. What?
Yes, Breonna Taylor.
Yes. And so this case of this issue of no knock warrant is something that has been ventilated globally. Under what circumstances would a no knock order be given to police to carry out?
Well, a no-knock warrant is in the rarest of cases. It has to be a significant public safety issue where you know that the person has a weapon, is capable of using it, and the person is a danger to the public. So you have to establish that, certainly, that there's a significant risk to the lives of law enforcers who are executing this warrant, so that there's nothing that is not no other measure could be anticipated rather than a no-knock warrant.
In your estimation, given what you know now, information may be forthcoming in the coming days and the coming weeks. Given what you know now from what you heard from the police and what you've heard from family and from people in the community, did you think it was justifiable?
I mean, the fact that the police issued a press statement and the press statement contained lies, you know, gives rise to the questionable nature of the police posture and the sort of cover up, or trying to fix a scenario or a scene. The family certainly give that different scenario, and the scenario that they give makes more sense than what the police states. The police doesn't state that the man came to them with a firearm, or that he fired a firearm through the door, or anything like that, which would be some of the logical courses of action of someone who wants to fight an intruder at 3 o'clock in the morning. The man, if he had a firearm, he could have drawn his firearm and fired. None of that is stated. What is stated is that the man attempted to grab the police weapon, and when we're talking about that, we have to ask ourselves the question whether the police were in uniform. Whether they were in uniform that clearly identified themselves as police, whether when they did the no-knock warrant, they announced themselves as police as they entered the premises. And these police officers were trained by the Canadians, by the Justice Educational Institute, spent thousands and millions of our taxpayers, our Canadian dollars, training these police officers. And one of the things that the police officers do during these no-knock warrants is they video record the entire scenario. Right? We understand that the Guyana Police Force have body-worn cameras, but they also have video cameras. So we also want to know whether their video, whether their objective video evidence of the scene that took place. But you asked me based on my experience whether what the police asserted makes sense. No, it does not make sense. It does not make sense to people with common sense and intelligence.
Selwyn, you mentioned early in the conversation this issue of political interference in the police. Um, I want you to tell our audience what are the implications when there is an interference, but when there is over interference of political actors in the work of police forces.
Well, certainly, as you know, and we're going to get to it in a second, certainly the situation that has arisen with the Police Service Commission, with the promotion of officers and all that sort of stuff, are as a result of political interference. When you have, it's almost like the saying, he who pays the piper call the tune. And so in the Guyana context, more so than other places, the political actors are very powerful and get their way. The political actors get their way, and outside of the police, if you look at the joint services, we have a substantive director of prisons, Gladwin Samuels, and as soon as the PPP came into power, the PPP moved the director of prisons without the color of law. They don't have that authority to do that, but yet they did that without the color of law. Moved the director of prisons to a position of assistant trafficking in persons coordinator, and has the man sitting in an office doing nothing, so that they can have somebody in the position that they can give directions to, and that person can follow their directions. I mean, the politicians in Guyana, more so than other places, they want to have, whether it's a police force or a prison service or a fire service or a defense force, where whatever they say is absolute. And so if they say, well, I want this person to be taken down, the police force, whoever they're speaking to, can say, well, we have the process A to D to follow before we can act on this. And that's why Paul Slow got into trouble. You make the analogy with Paul Slow because when Paul Slow was an assistant commissioner of police, he refused to hand back a firearm in 2002 to a person who was involved in what was alleged to be an offense. And he said, well, while this matter is being investigated and prosecuted, we cannot hand back the firearm to this person. And because the Minister of Home Affairs was involved and the president was involved, and Paul Slow decided that he was going to follow the letter and the spirit of the law, he was punished then, and he's been punished now in the capacity as the chairman of the Police Service Commission. So the political directorate does have significant influence in a small country, small populace, Guyana, because of the consequences. A lot of people do not want to face the consequences of going against a political order or a political directive. And I suspect that's why Gladwin Samuels hasn't fighted that undignified, that unjust, and that illegal removal from his job, his position as director of prisons, to assistant coordinator of trafficking in persons with no job description, no duties, and no work. He just goes there, and his dignity is demeaned every day by being given nothing to do. He just sits in an office doing nothing, simply because the political directorate wants to punish him, not for anything that he's done, but punish him because of their perception of him and also that they wanted somebody in to run the prison service who is pliable to their demands.
Thank you very much, Selwyn Peters. In case you're just joining us, this is Politics 101. Tonight we are scheduled to talk about the Police Service Commission case. The case, or a part of the case, was heard today in court, questioning whether the president could be listed as part of the case that the Police Service Commission has brought against the commissioner and, of course, against the president for violating the Constitution by refusing to promote those policemen and women who were duly promoted by the Police Service Commission. The part of the case that was heard today was whether, in fact, the president is immune from prosecution, and so therefore he should not be part of the case. But when we decided that we were going to do this show today, we did not know that between then and now, there would be murder in the middle of the night, murder of 4-day morning, where another young black man is killed at the hands of the police under suspicious circumstances. We had the Peter Headley case, which we talked about on this show with attorney Selwyn Peters. The last we heard of that case is that they have done their investigation, but they have not come to a conclusion. And yesterday, the people of Dartmouth woke up to the horror that another of their sons has been murdered. That the SWAT team left Georgetown, according to the police force, to go looking for contraband. And they end up murdering this young man. So he is a contraband, if that's what they were looking for. We have to say it. You do not hear these cases very often in the Indian Guyanese community or the Amerindian Guyanese community. You hear them more, you experience them more in the Black community. Let's call a spade a spade. I don't care what they say, that everything is race to me. Everything is race to me because everything has been reduced to race in Guyana. I would rather it not be that. I would rather tonight be talking about music because I love music. I would rather be talking about poetry and drama because I love poetry and drama. But when you are constantly killing men and women who look like me, then I can't talk about poetry and drama and music. We didn't come here tonight to talk about murder. We came here tonight to talk about what the court has said today about the president, whether in fact he's an absolute president or he's a president that is subject to the Constitution and the laws of Guyana. That's what we came here to talk about tonight. But as I said at the beginning of the program, I was asleep. Because where I am, it's 3 hours behind the East Coast, 3 hours behind Guyana. And I'm a late sleeper. I usually go to bed at around 1 o'clock, sometimes 2 o'clock. And at 7 o'clock, I was just turning. My phone rang. It was Mark Benshaw. Doc, wake up. Yes, Mark, what's the problem? You want me tonight for your show? You're calling me early, man. No, I want you now. Why? Have you heard of the murder in Ghana? What murder, Mark? They've murdered a man in Dartmouth just as they murder your neighbor, Shaka Blair. Mark, what are you talking about? Professor, get up and go look at your news. And lo and behold, I got up from my bed, checked the news, and was greeted with this sort of wake up early this morning. That's the John King calypso from John King, which is now becoming the anthem. Woke up this morning. I woke up yesterday morning to this dreaded news. One more. I weep so much in private, whether it's the United States or Guyana or wherever. I weep every day for Black people. We are so vulnerable to the worst in the human instinct. And yesterday morning, I wept. I heard two women talk about the killing of another man. Bob Marley's song, Bob Marley's reggae song, "Woman, hold your head and cry, for your son has been shot down on the street." All because of the system. Woman, hold your head and cry. And as I heard the voices of those women, I remember the women who raised me and who were constantly afraid, even back then. I wept tears of frustrations, tears of anger. The fear that one has to live with, sometimes it becomes crippling. I did not ask to be a public person, but when you are a public person, you have the responsibility of publicly showing your emotions, publicly mourning. And so we came here tonight to talk about another form of police brutality. And we had to begin our conversation by talking about this murder. That's what Selwyn and I have been talking about. The question is this: there've always been extrajudicial killing from the Middle Passage to now. But our society has moved on. We have become independent. It's our responsibility to ensure the rule of law, not the colonial responsibility. They're gone. The colonials shut down Black men and women, and we beat colonialism to end that. But instead of ending it, it seems as if it has escalated. The data shows that more of this happens when an Indian Guyanese-led government is in power. I'm not biased. I remember the days of the kick down the door under the PNC in the 70s and the 80s. I remember that during the same so-called contraband thing, police would kick down the door and so forth of people. And I thought those days were gone. And then for the 23 years, that kind of behavior became a staple. And we had a little pause between 2015 and 2020. And as soon as the PPP came back to power, we had the trial run with Christopher Jones on that night when women stood in front of that man's house. And as soon as their backs were turned, they kicked on that door and went in and terrorized that man, took him away in front of his wife and children. Our women have had to witness this for 400 years. Our women have to watch their men being brutalized by the system for 400 years. Our men have had to watch our women being raped. Their bodies being disrespected for 400 years. It still happens. And in most cases, we're helpless. Is this what we have won our independence for? Is this what independence is? I'm aware that there is always the tension between freedom and order. And so there is a role for the police force. There is a role for the police force. But the police force, the first duty is to protect and serve, not to kick down and murder. Yep. I have a lot of friends on this show, in this audience, women and men who serve the police force. We recruit members of the police force from our communities, in the case of Guyana, from the African Guyanese communities. But we recruit them and we turn them into monsters, some of them. The majority, the vast majority, are good men and women in uniform. They're good policemen and women. Bob Marley, during the curfew in the 1970s in Jamaica, he said, I woke up this morning and I was a prisoner too. Standing over me were people dressed in uniforms of brutality. He was referring to the police. He said, how much longer must we wait to see the face of that man, the face of justice? Around Martin Carter in 1953, when our people woke up, the British soldiers sent to our Guyana to overthrow first elected government in 1953. This is a dark time, my love. It is a season of oppression, dark metal and tears. It is the festival of guns. Everywhere the faces of men are strained and anxious. I know that poem to heart because since I was a boy, it made me aware. Sharp metals, dark metals, the guns. Everywhere the faces of men are strained and anxious. My goodness, that was 1953. This is 2021, and our faces are still strained and anxious. As brown beetles crawl about in the middle of the night, in the wee hours of the morning. The festival of guns continued that Martin Carter talked about. Everywhere the faces of men are strained and anxious. Red flowers, the salt of the earth, the ordinary people. Red flowers bend their heads. How many more? How many more? Guyana, I can't take it. I just can't take it. I just can't take it. What is it? What is it that the worst of the system is used on us always, always. I know the answer. I know the answer. I know it theoretically. What must we do in the face of this? We are a good Christian people. Because we are a good spiritual people. We came to Christianity with our own religions that we brought from our homeland. Religions, not religion. That is why when we encountered the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, the Trinity, it made sense to us. Because we came from a place with multiple religions. And our religions have taught us to be peaceful. But what is peace in the face of violence? Does it still have the moral currency when our peace, Brother Bob again, saying in one of his songs, in reward for our love, because we're a people of love, you've given us your hate. It's that time. Someone says that time again. It can't continue. We can't continue to live like this. We can't continue to live like this. The police said it is going to do a thorough investigation. No stone shall be left unturned. The man who shot is in close arrest and all of that thing. We welcome that. But that's not all we want. We want it to stop. Mr. Hoppy, you're a black man like me. We want it to stop. We've heard this before. We've had investigations before. Yes, I want an investigation, don't get me wrong. But investigation after investigation, this nonsense doesn't stop. I'm holding myself. Yesterday morning, I asked MP Sherwin Old, I said, please tell those people, do not interfere with ordinary Indians and look out for people who may be coming in to interfere with ordinary Indians to portray us as barbaric people. And it was so pleasing to see some East Indians in the crowd there at Dartmouth yesterday. Because after they come for us, they may come for you too. Solidarity is important. But at some point, this has to stop. Alvin, you still there with me, my brother?
Yes, Dr. Hines. And Dr. Hines, everything that you said is fit and proper for this program tonight, because what happened to Mr. Boston yesterday raises a fundamental issue of public interest as to right to life. Right? That's number one. Number two, despite the detractors, and we cannot be obstructed or prevented from saying our piece by detractors. Guyana is a country where race and racism is at the fore of most of what happens in that society. And so when the police kills a black man, the question of whether implicit bias, whether stereotyping, or whether systemic anti-black racism played a role in the circumstances of that death is a live issue. People are stereotyped in Guyana. Even I am stereotyped as a professional, a black lawyer with dreadlocks. If someone doesn't know me, I'm susceptible to the stereotypes of what people think a raster or a person with dreadlock is. And so when I'm in Guyana, I understand that, and I'm alive to it. So no one can tell me that racism is not at play or anti-black racism. The police themselves, whether they're black or East Indian or Chinese or any other race, they're in a system that is imbued with structural and systemic bias and racism. And so the question to be asked in those circumstances that you've raised is opposite. It's right. It's fit. It's proper.
Selwyn Peters, attorney at law, keeping my company tonight. Selwyn, what happened in court today?
Yes. So let's get to the Police Service Commission's case, which was very important. So we had a ruling today from Justice Gino Prasad, and given the comments that Justice Prasad made during the oral hearing, in my mind, his ruling was not surprising. I mean, Adam Nandalal made the submissions about the president walking up the court steps, and he adopted that and actually adopted it and repeated it in his ruling that it's not for the president to walk up the court steps. He found that section 182, subsection 1 of the Constitution is a shield to the president, um, where it comes to him being exposed to the curial or the judicial process, whether it's in civil or criminal proceedings. But he didn't distinguish constitutional law matters as a special branch of law that is well above civil or criminal proceedings. He didn't wrestle with that, but he found that there was a shield that protects the president. He found that the sword that exists, he used the sword and shield concept, and he said the sword that exists is that even though there's a shield that protects the president, the sword is that it doesn't protect any actions that he take that is not consistent with the rule of law, but that the attorney general stands in that place of the president. So the president isn't exposed to the curial process, but the attorney general in his stead is exposed to the process. And he felt that naming the president here was impermissible and wrong. He felt, and this is an interesting case, is where the attorney general basically pulled the wool from under the judges, pulled the rug from under the judge, because what happened is mere hours before the ruling, the attorney general filed an application to strike the entire proceedings out.
Yeah.
So he could have filed. So the judge wasn't even aware of this application when he wrote his judgment, and when he was delivering his judgment, he wasn't aware of that. So he spoke about the attorney general defending the substantive matters, and that the substantive matters will be ventilated and the rule of law will be upheld if there's a violation of the Constitution and all kind of stuff. And the attorney general basically, I I I have thoughts on what they did, but I'm not going to say it publicly. But quite frankly, I mean, if the attorney general and his department determined that they wanted to strike this application out, they had from August 9th to September 15th. They filed it to the day that they filed it in moments before the judge rendered his judgment, and in a manner that didn't bring it to the judge's attention. They could have served the stuff electronically So it's like a bait and switch kind of thing, as we call it, a bait and switch action, an action that sucks, it stinks, it reeks. But what they have to know is this case. What they have to know is that in this case, I'll tell them this. They're dealing with Paul Slow, they're dealing with Clinton Conway, they're dealing with Vesta Adams, they're dealing with Claire Jarvis, they're dealing with Michael Somersall, and they're dealing with Selvin Peters. No retreat, no surrender. This matter is going all the way. This matter is going all the way. We're not going to have Guyana turn into autocracy. We're not going to have Guyana turn into a system where the president thinks that he's the imprimatur, he's primus mobile, he's as Anna Nandla says, the king could do no wrong. Those days are gone. Well,
Yes.
those days are past us. And so
Selvin,
we're going to stand up.
we are a republic. We are a republic. And the role of the president, or the standing of the president in a republic, is different from a standing of the president in a monarchy. As a republic, and I want you to help me and the audience here, there are some requests to open the lines, and I am going to open the lines because there are demands for us to open the lines. So, Mr. Operator, please, if you can get ready to open the line, so we'll take some calls in a couple of minutes. But Selvin, I want you to deconstruct here for our listeners, our viewers, the role of the head of state in a republic as opposed to the head of state in a monarchy.
Well, the president of the country has significant powers he's head of state and head of government. So he has a dual function in the Constitution that certainly vested a lot of powers in a president who also has a majority in parliament, you see. So he has a majority of the parliament, and he's the head of state. So he has significant powers, and those powers, for example, he cannot be impeached right now because he has a majority. So a motion would not even pass the speaker if the opposition tried to impeach him, because they don't have the numbers to impeach him. But I think what the populace needs to know is he's not above the law. He's not above the law, but the Constitution, as structured and as the ruling of Justice Gino Prasad stays and Justice Harnanen, is he is completely immune from the curial process, whether he involves in a criminal act or in a civil act, whether in his personal capacity or his public capacity. So in a situation, the crudest situation is if something happens in his private residence and his wife calls the police or something, or he hits his son too hard and his wife is upset and calls the police. Even if the police were meant to lay charges, he's immune from that process because the Constitution says that nothing could happen to him if he commits an act in a criminal act while as a president.
But isn't that an extreme reading of his powers?
It's not an extreme reading. It's an unfortunate construction of the Constitution. Because remember that when he had the 19 fraud charges, those charges disappeared once he assumed the presidency, because that's what the Constitution says, that he's not to be exposed. He, in his personal capacity, is not to be exposed to that process.
Is this the case in most or all of the governments in the Commonwealth, because those would be the ones that are closest to Guyana.
No, and I have problems with Justice Gino Passad's ruling, but we haven't seen his written decision yet. I assume that he's written this decision, and it should have been sent out to us already, but we haven't seen his written decision, so I don't know what he wrote. But he relied on the Sri Lankan constitution. He relied on Section 35 of the Sri Lankan constitution, and interestingly enough, the Sri Lankan constitution is different from ours. And in his oral judgment, he didn't distinguish that. The Sri Lankan constitution says that the attorney general sits in for the president where an action is brought against the president in his for actions taken in his official capacity. Our constitution doesn't say that, but yet Justice Prasad relied on the Sri Lankan constitution and said, well, hey, the Sri Lankan constitution is similar to ours. So, he wrote his judgment, but his judgment is not final. There are courts upwards that can look at this, and we will get instructions from our clients as to how to move forward in this case. But these decisions. Look, even in the United States, the president isn't above the Constitution. Donald Trump had so many cases before the court. President Clinton had cases
That's
before the
right.
court. President Nixon had cases
That's right.
before the court, and the court did not shielded the president. Even Donald Trump, with his recent tax records, the court did not rule in his favor. He had to turn over his tax record. He had to be subjected to the process.
Yes, yes, yes. In the Nixon case, where Nixon didn't want to turn over the tapes to Congress, the court, and he argued separation of powers, and the court too said no. There is a line. This is a case bordering on a criminal case, and so therefore you've got to turn over those tapes, which of course triggered is not removal, was it resignation as president in Clinton, when he did not want to allow his bodyguards to go give evidence. The court said, you got to allow them. So even in a place like the United States of America, the president is not supreme. There is a line at which he or she becomes accountable to the Constitution.
That's right, and look at rich countries. Kenya is far richer than Guyana in terms of financial resources and any kind of resources, and its population is quite larger. And President Uhuru Kenyatta had to show up before the International Criminal Court. He had to leave Kenya and show up and account for the allegations of atrocities against his citizens, and he's also had to deal with cases in the courts in Kenya. Or look at Panama with Manuel Noriega, or even right across the border, Brazil, with that president that they jailed for his conduct as president. So, the Guyana Constitution is, and its interpretation is extreme.
Yes, it's the interpretation. So, Selwyn, what next for this case? The Attorney General is now moved to the court, asking the court to dismiss the case.
Yes, well, obviously they don't want to. Obviously, the concept of unaccountability is being laid bare before the public, right? We see the sort of actions played out, right? The first action is that they were supposed to appoint a tribunal. They don't appoint a tribunal. No tribunal was appointed up to the end of the tribunal's existence, the commission's existence. They said, okay. They said, bring it on, bring a case. We brought a case. They moved to get the president struck out. They got the president struck out. Now they're saying, because the life of the commission has ended, we want this application struck. There's no new commission. This old commission still exists. This old commission, there's an interregnum, but in respect to the interregnum, there still remains the issue of whether or not the president's actions were lawful when he suspended the commission without the conditions precedent to the commission being suspended being met. That's a significant um, issue of constitutional importance, notwithstanding the life of the commission has ended. And then the second issue is the Constitution says that the Constitution actually has a provision similar to that of Parliament that shield the decisions that were made by Charan Das. When Charan Das Prasad voted with the opposition to bring down the government of the day, he was not entitled to sit in the legislature, and the courts all the way up to the CCJ ruled that the constitutional provisions that says that even if Charan Das wasn't entitled to vote or be in parliament, those actions are still protected
Yeah.
by the Constitution. And similarly, Section 226 of the Constitution, 226 subsection 3, has that for the Police Service Commission, that any actions that they took while sitting in those chairs as commissioners are constitutionally protected. And so what is left to be determined, in addition to whether or not the president acted outside of the scope of the Constitution, is whether the promotion of those 132 officers are valid and cover and fall within the substratum of 226 subsection 3 of the Constitution.
There you have it, Mr. Selwyn Peters. Tell you what, we're going to open the phones now, and we're going to get your take on what happened in Dartmouth in the wee hours of yesterday morning. Are we going to get your take on the case, the ruling today that the president is cannot be taken to court? What are the implications of that? Mr. Peters has said that the problem lies in the formulation in the Constitution, but even more importantly, in the interpretation of those formulations. So we have two big issues. Give us a call and let's get your take on these two issues. Of course, what has happened in Dartmouth is not new. It's not new. It has been going on forever. It has become a staple of this PPP government. And there comes a time when we have to put a stop to this nonsense. This thing about the lives of our young men and women, but they're mostly men, are given any value. Professor Eddie Glaude talks about the changing of the value system. How do we value Black lives? We see our police going into Indian Guyanese areas, and when faced with crowds, they run. And they go into African Guyanese areas, and they become instantly trigger happy. What is it? There must be something beyond just being a police that informs that kind of behavior. That informs that kind of behavior. How much longer must Black men, how much longer must Black women watch this business about little children and women watching their fathers and their husbands being gunned down? It's serious business. What are we saying to those children? Are we messing their heads up when they have to watch that? And it happens in the dark of night. In the dark of night. In the dark of night. I'm going to take a short break. and then come with your calls on the other side.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
Come back to Politics 101. We have a few minutes to go.
Dr. Hines, we have a caller.
Okay, caller, you're on the air.
Good night, Dr. Hines, and to all the viewing public. Now, my little bit about the murder in Dartmouth. That's the way of the PPP regime. Every time they go and visit somewhere, if they ain't sharing a set of COVID and killing out people, they murdering them like how they murdered that man. And you know that used to happen in years gone back. They literally destroyed Buxton because they took away many of the men. And the men that they are killing are in their prime, who could still contribute and make a bigger black population to wipe them out. So when they wipe them out, you can't do nothing. The next thing with the court case, I think that if they drop in front from the matter, the next thing that Vincent will do, he is going to say that the case is with in front and nobody else. And then they're going to go to the court and judge going to say, it's not nobody did this thing, it's he. And once he do it, and they don't want him in court, the case got to scratch out. But I hope the persons who are in the problem with him don't let the matter drop. Let the matter go all the way to the CCJ. If possible, let it end up at the Hague. Because I think that these installed rulers need to be made an example of. And the moment you want to step back, they're going to come back harder than before and they're going to continue to do what they want to do. Look what happened in the murder. I hope the people get justice, which I know to the back of my mind will end up like the Henry boys and the Jonas man who threw the slit a little before the Henry boys. You don't hear about the Jonas. You just hear about the Henry boys. So, good night, and I'm coming out that another person could make their contribution.
Thank you very much. What do you think about that theory? Let's put you're muted.
Dr. Hines, you were broken up for a second.
No, I was saying, what do you think about the theory that the callers put forward there, that they will make the president and not the commissioner the sole person in the case, and so therefore, since the court has already ruled that he's immune from power, that he therefore has the power to not promote the people?
Well, no. The Attorney General is now sitting in the place of the president. So, the court, if we get over the hurdle of this other application brought by the Attorney General. So essentially, this case is delayed until next year because we're arguing the application on November 10th. And we don't know when the court is going to bring down its ruling on whether it should strike out the entire application. Assuming it doesn't strike out the application, then the Attorney General sits in the role of the president for the purpose of the judicial action for the court to determine whether or not the actions taken by the president in suspending the Police Service Commission was in contravention of the Constitution, and also whether the actions taken by the Police Services Commission during that suspension, when it released the July 28th promotion list, whether that fell within their powers under Article 226, subsection 3 of the Constitution. So there are a lot of significant issues, and I don't think that only one party was struck from the application, which is the president. But the lawfulness of his actions weren't struck, or the unlawfulness of his actions. Those actions are still to be determined after we get over this second hurdle, or third hurdle, because it seems like it seems like when the Attorney General says bring it to court, it's just in theory, but in practice he doesn't really want us to bring it to court. So he's doing everything in his powers to or strategically to ensure that this doesn't get a hearing on the merits, but they will get a hearing on the merits. He could be assured of that, because we're not the people that are affected are not going to let it go.
Okay, all right. So there you have it. The case will go on.
We got another caller, Dr. Hanks. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, caller.
Yes, good night, gentlemen. Good night to the viewers as well.
Good night.
When we claim that we're living in a civilized society and uncivilized actions are taken against citizens, how do we then, I think possibly the attorney could respond, how then do we respond to situations like this? Why do we continue to use the same system that is in place that should be functional, but it is not functional? That was an uncivilized act by a so-called civilized citizen that is paid by taxpayers' money. And we then, obviously we haven't reached any matter of the court, etc., but I'm assuming that something like that would be coming up and soon. Then how do we handle such a situation? And also, we continue to go through the same struggle continuously. There's so many unresolved cases. Strangely, since the current government is in office, back to how it was for the previous 23 years. Sadly, the previous government only had a few years in office, and they could not have amended multiple laws. But I'm assuming that if the opportunity comes up once more for the opposition to resume office, I would hope that they would prioritize certain sections of the Constitution to be revised or amended to avoid stuff, and especially one when it comes to protecting a president of a country. I find it very unfair and strange to the citizens of a country who need to pay from contributions to the treasury, who we then pay the politicians, and then that person then is protected. For example, the current president whose charges were dropped, even though they were laid to him prior to becoming president, and that things like those ought to be revised to avoid any future president. Any president who sits there and does not do that, then they are comfortable with the current situation. I hope that.
Well, you raise some important issues. There are supposed to be safeguards within the system. For example, in the criminal process, there's supposed to be a director of public prosecution, who we do have, and the director of public prosecution is supposed to be independent, impartial, fair, unbiased, because she's a law officer, and all the colleagues that are below her as prosecutors are law officers, and they're supposed to be looking at the broader public interest rather than private interests. And we have certain feelings in the system because of how the system is structured, how it is operated, and the political interference that infests the system. I understand your concern with respect to, for example, the president being subject to such a wide suite, as the judge said, a wide suite of immunities. But you'd be surprised that a lot of other public office holders are also subject to a wide suite of immunities, including judges. Police officers have certain immunities. Um, but they don't have immunity from lawless actions. So if a police officer so an extrajudicial killing represents lawless law enforcement, right? There's no immunity for extrajudicial killing, right? And you ask, well, what can the citizens do? I mean, the problem with lawless law enforcement, extrajudicial killings, impunity, not immunity, but impunity, is that citizens start taking actions, the law into their own hands, and citizens start reacting as they feel appropriate. And that's why, even in the police context, you're seeing all these videos with citizens actually resisting the police officers, which is something that is not advised. But if somebody comes to the conclusion that a police officer is going to kill me, a police officer is going to murder me, then in their mind, they have nothing to lose. And we saw an incident on social media recently where I think it was in the United States, where a person was involved in a gunfight with the police. That person the person subsequently died, but that person had to come to the conclusion when those 3 police officers pulled their guns out and started firing at him that he was going down. He had nothing to lose, and he was going to fight back. And so that's the extreme case. But then in the normal cases, people will fight back. And you see that with people on the streets right now. You saw that with people in Dartmouth, Essequibo, and making their voices known. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that the Office of Professional Responsibility will deliver any justice in this case. Maybe they need to have an inquest by impartial law officers from the Commonwealth to hear the evidence and make findings in this case, and then prosecute based on the findings of those law officers.
All right, we have another caller. Caller, you're on the air.
Go ahead, caller. We lost the call.
Okay. All right. We are coming down to program time. The caller raised the question of what is to be done. What is to be done? And I think it's both a legal question, a judicial question, but it's also a political question. What is to be done politically? We have another caller.
Go ahead, caller.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Hines, and good evening to your guests. I'd like to share a light on this issue there in Essequibo. Now, I think there's at the TSU, I think they represent in the various region for anti-crime task. It is worrying to know what the SWAT team, that doesn't belong to those type of operation, like anti-crime or kicking down the door and doing search and stuff like that. Why the SWAT team is involved in such activity? I think Happy needs to tell the Guyanese what really is going on. I know that the SWAT team is equipped for specialized for
challenging or handling dangerous riots and confronting various vicious criminals who possess distinct threats. Nothing of the sort like that went on there at Dermont or what you call it in Ezekiel. So what was the purpose for the squad team to be carrying out such function that they are not to, that they were designated to or intended? You know,
that's a legitimate question.
They need to answer. Secondly, to your guest, the lawyer, Mr. Ali, Efron Ali, was charged prior to his presidency with the 19 charges. He became president. They threw out, they take away the charges, then they threw him out. When he leave office, could those charges be reinstituted? That's my contribution.
Well, the charges were withdrawn by the Director of Public Prosecution. It is unlikely that the charges, theoretically, yes, it could be continued after he leaves office, but it's highly unlikely that those charges would be reinstituted after he leaves office. I mean, the issue of delay, the issue of evidence, the issue of his constitutional rights. If let's say the PPP is in office for 10 years, and how can you reinstitute the charges for something that happened 15 or 20 years ago? And so it's going to risk.
Another director of public prosecution couldn't that person reinstitute the charges, reinstate the proceedings?
Well, it would be another director of public prosecution may be able to reinstitute the proceedings, but it's what the court will say about the reinstitution of the charges.
Okay, whether there's malice. Okay, caller, you're in there.
Good night. I'd like to make a small contribution. Reference what I'm seeing going on in Dartmouth, Essequibo. I'm calling from the diaspora, but I am an Essequibian, and this is very interesting. First of all, I think based on what I got in a telephone conversation last night with someone from Essequibo, I think the police, I think some attention has to be given to this guy, Critic. Now, I understand, this is what I was told, that at a meeting, I think about a year or two before, Boston was at this meeting with the president and them, and he had a conversation with Critic. Now, it's very critical to know and to understand that Critic is one of the PPP home slaves. And I guess Boston said something, at least that's what I was told. He said something to Critic, something he disapproved of. And this must have been taken to the PPP administration. And surprisingly, a year or two after, he's dead. So I think some attention got to be focused on Critic. Critic must talk what the conversation he had with Boston was all about. Secondly, suddenly it's come up now that this plan with the SWAT team was to arrest criminals in Essequibo. Okay, that might have been so. My point is that if they had reasons to arrest criminals, as they said, criminals were arrested, well, let us see the reason why they had to be at Boston's house too. Because they must have had some reason to be there, whether by warrant or whether by arrest for some crime committed or whatever. But if they arrested criminals, they must show on what grounds those criminals were arrested or the order to arrest them arrested. And they must also show on our grounds, Boston House was raided and he was shot. And that's my contribution.
Thank you so much. We have another caller.
Not as yet.
All right. So we have some perspectives there. We have concerns. The police, obviously, they have a lot of questions to answer, but everything is pointing to a political implication. Everything is pointing to this entanglement, by political forces. And this issue of political interference in the police force is a very pertinent issue.
We have a caller.
Caller, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Hines. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, sir. What I want to say is that the government is very much intimidated by the Black society.
You want to stop listening to your phone, I think. Go ahead.
Go ahead, caller.
Yes, Mr. Hines.
Yes,
What I
ma'am.
want to say to you tonight is the government is so intimidated by the Black society. In order for them to be in control, it's like they want to be in dictatorship or create for power, as though they would say they are superior to the Black race.
Yes, continue.
Hello?
Yes,
We're listening.
Another thing that I want to say is the Black people are being more targeted than the Indians because, for one, they feel threatened. They feel threatened by the Black society because they think that they are superior to Black people and they are better than the Black people, or okay, they are as in God-like people. So the Black people come in as the nothing to these people. And what the PPP is really doing is they're condoning racism into the whole entire country. They're trying to divide these two races. I mean, we have 6 races, yeah, but the two main one is the Indian and the Black. And what they're trying to do is divide us. And people are not seeing that at any point. It comes like Samson's story, Samson Delilah. In order for them to get power over him, they had to weaken him. They had to cut his hair off. So that is what this illegitimate or illegal installed president is doing right now. They're trying to cripple the Black people right now.
All right.
Thank you very much, sister. Thank you very much for that intervention. What you're describing there is what we call institutional racism and how people can use their power to institute their prejudices. And that is certainly not something that is good for multi-ethnic society. In a multi-ethnic society, all people have to be treated well, even if you have fears of another ethnic group. You should not use the power at your disposal to institute those fears and to use your institutional power to eliminate other people. Once you do that, you're creating chaos in the society. Because what happens is that when those people who are targeted react, then everyone becomes vulnerable. We enter into a situation of chaos and anarchy, and then everyone becomes vulnerable. So your point is critical, and it is something that we have to bear in mind.
You have a caller?
Go ahead, caller.
Hello?
Go ahead, caller.
Yes, sir. I could remember growing up this constitution that we have here, right? The to call this constitution Burnham Constitution. And the PPP had a big problem with this constitution. Mr. Jagan had even said that if he should come to power, he would have thrown this constitution in. But I could remember when Mr. Jagan came to power, 92, right? UC Prasad asked him, well, Doc, you're in power now. What are you? With the constitution, you know, it's the person that was holding power at the time. So, you understand? The Burnham Constitution, the PPP sheltering under right now. What I have a big problem with. Thank you.
The caller is so correct. The caller is a student of history. That's exactly the case. When Dr. Jagan had a chance to change his constitution that they pass out and abuse out, he said, it's not the constitution, it's the man and the people who were under the constitution. And today we see that the PPP is using the extreme parts of the constitution in order to institute a dictatorship. It's the hypocrisy of politicians, including the best ones, because Dr. Jagan is not like these riffraff that you have now. Dr. Jagan was an honorable man, but even he played games with the Constitution. Okay, so I think we have gone a full evening. The people of Dartmouth are out protesting. We have to support them because, you know, all the other communities are vulnerable to this situation. Selvin, your final thoughts?
Dr. Hayes, these court actions are very important for our democratic architecture and our democratic society. And we would like the public to stay tuned to the further actions that are taking place and the further decisions that the court makes in respect to the Constitution, because the Constitution, of course, applies to all of us. And certainly, you know, if we cannot allow the Constitution to be carved in or interpreted in a certain way so that the rights of citizens or the rights of constitutional office holders who sit in service commissions are rendered nugatory. And so that is a fight that we have in respect to the situation involving the Police Service Commission. And then there's another case, as you know, that was ruled upon last week by Justice Harnanen, which upheld the Parliament's decision to subject the funding of these constitutional agencies to the state through their Ministry of Finance. So there are a lot of interesting cases with respect to how the government is certainly closing in the sort of structures that make decisions in Guyanese society, and we need to challenge it, and so we have to applaud the Police Service Commission members, Paul Slow, Michael Summersall, Vesta Adams, Clinton Conway, and Claire Jarvis for standing up, because certainly, I mean, their term ended on August 9th, and they could have slipped quietly into the sunset, get their pensions, and let it be the end of it, but they're not doing that. So we have to certainly applaud them for challenging the lawless actions, the illegal actions of the president in suspending them, and trying to get the court to uphold the constitutionality of the promotion order. We also have to challenge lawless law enforcement on the part of the police. I mean, if the police, I mean, Guyana is in a critical state right now where the police themselves are laying bogus charges against each other. You know, the charges for forgery and conspiracy to commit fraud against Paul Slow and the rest of them, those are bogus charges. And you know, and Justice George mentioned in her her ruling recently that the some of the actions taken by a certain person who is acting in the deputy commissioner's position was self-serving and brought the administration of justice into disrepute. And so, you know, we have a lot of bad things that are happening right now, and hopefully cool heads would prevail, and people would start acting in ways that are not self-serving and act rather in the public interest. Because if you're speaking about one Guyana encompasses all Guyanese, regardless of their political stripes. You are the PPP right now, and Dr. Irfaan Ali, they're in power. You know, they should be extending the olive branch rather than sort of exacerbating tensions. And you know, I mean, I have to agree with the leader of the opposition and the people in the opposition camp, where they say, look, we're prepared to engage in discussions with you as per the Constitution, but we're not going to come on our knees. We're not going to be put in a inferior position. You know, you treat us, we're going to treat you with the respect that your office deserves, and you do likewise. I mean, so the PPP would be you know, well served if they act in a broader public interest, if they act with a certain magnanimity. You know, this sort of posturing right now is not helpful to us as Guyanese.
It's not helpful to us as Guyanese people. On that note, thank you, Selwyn, my brother. Thank you for coming on and shedding some light on both issues, the issues of the gunning down of Mr. Boston and the ongoing case or cases that have been brought by the Police Service Commission. Thank you, and please come back soon so that we can continue this discussion and have your input from a legal standpoint. And of course, you're a black man too, like me. Good night, my brother.
Good night.
And to you, my audience, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much. Without you, we don't have a show. And you came out in your numbers tonight, and I'm glad. I want us to hold hands and hold hearts. Once again, we are under attack. We've been saying that over and over again. This government has no good intentions towards those of us they perceive to be their political enemies. So we've got to stand firm. We've got to stand firm. Today is almost gone. Tomorrow comes and we face the murderous pack, as poet Claude McKay puts it. We face the murderous pack. Even with our backs to the wall, we are not going to give up. Even with our backs to the wall, we're not going to give up. Justice for Orrin Boston is justice for all black men and all black people and all oppressed people, regardless of their race and ethnicity in Guyana and beyond. We come in peace. We leave with some rage, some righteous rage. And righteous rage is part of the human instinct. We must show them our rage. And we must operationalize our rage in constructive ways so that once again, we will be free. We will be free. We must be free. We have to be free. There is too much at stake. Good night. Be gone.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.